What's up guys, it's me Deshaun, and today we're going to be doing another Fire Force video. And with the start of this video, I'd like to say that we're going to be doing more chapter reviews just like this in the future, because there's a lot going on in Fire Force at the moment and we just need to talk about it because, man, it's a lot to unpack. Before we get started, I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can. I just have a few things to say. Number one, spoiler alert, there's obviously spoilers in this video. 2, if you like this video, like and subscribe. And 3, if you want to support our channel even more, we have a Patreon. There will be a link to that in a pinned comment at the bottom of this video. For those of you who have not been reading, I'm going to give you guys a little synopsis. And maybe you guys might not remember even if you have been reading. So, Sho and Shinra have entered the world of perception, aka Adala. Or Adola, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Shinra and Sho then pull up to a pillar that looks like Amaterasu, aka the waifu Amaterasu and not the machine. But that doesn't mean machines can't be waifus.
上调节曲径筒往上上升，我们往下调节的话，曲径筒会往下下降。这个主要是根据患者的身高来调节。
I'm waiting on you, 2025. So after they pull up to this pillar, they begin to talk to Haomei. And if you guys haven't already known, Haomei was taking on the entire collective unconscious of all of humanity's sins. Meaning that her mind was filled with all of humanity's evil thoughts. And it turns out she was wearing this crown over her face because she was blocking her vision so that she could always listen to humanity's unconscious and God's revelation. And then we are finally met with Haomei's face reveal. Haomei chose to close off her eyes until the day of destiny, the promised day of when the cataclysm will destroy the earth and the cosmos as we know it. Well, I guess you could say rewrite the cosmos. If you guys have been watching my other Fire Force videos, I recommend you do that, because if you did, it would definitely help with understanding what the fuck is going on in this series. Just in case if any of this sounds like rocket science to you. So in closing her eyes, Haomei actually received God's divine revelation through this. Well, I guess you could say this would be their interpretation of God, because after all, there is no Shinigami as of right now. Because if she would have closed herself off from all of that light, it would only make sense for her to come across the evangelist. And it turns out this giant eye that was actually looking down on the earth was her eye. And through this tear that she would drop down onto the earth would die, or be reborn as a second son. And after these details are revealed, Inka and Sumair accept Haomei's hand, and when doing so, they are immediately burned alive to be used as fuel for the cataclysm. And in the end, both Inka and Sumair got what they wanted. A person's death is both despair and salvation. Inka was the despair, and mind you, this is the despair that she's always wanted, and through this, that despair led to her death. And Sumair wanted salvation through this same death. After all, she was a pillar from the very first cataclysm. So after being alive for so long and escaping her inevitable fate from the first cataclysm, her death in the first cataclysm would be like salvation for her. And it is through this moment Shinra begins to develop a frustration. After all, he is the pillar of rage. And it is through this developing anxiety during his conversation with Haomei, Shinra slowly starts to lose himself. Haomei then proclaims that death is the only true salvation, and Shinra begins to argue against it. But despite Shinra's rebuttal, only a god has the power to justify that inconsistency. And this says a lot about humanity and what we believe in. If we all believe that humanity is fucked, or that the apocalypse is going to happen soon, what do you think is going to happen? Those thoughts will then become reality, because we are unintentionally giving those thoughts power. We are unintentionally believing that said thing. A lot of people online like to jokingly say, oh, the world's fucked, or they have no faith in humanity. But when you think about it, when you have that negative mindset, you're giving that idea power. And when you give that said thing enough power, it can manifest. It's almost like a trend. If one person started to believe that there is no faith in humanity, and then that same idea started to spread like a disease, that would be the new trend, and that trend would be our new reality. Because at some point, nobody would have faith in humanity. And if you don't have faith in humanity and you are a human, that will inevitably mean that you don't have faith in yourself either. And when you don't have faith in yourself or those around you, you will eventually despair. Now, could you imagine if everyone on Earth started to do that? The world would literally go to shit off of a trend. As humans, we make our own history, and our own history is despair because we choose to make it that way. The history of mankind always follows the path of despair. Anger, hatred, anxiety, artificial destruction, and natural disasters. And all of this negative energy, all of these thoughts that we have are now mixing with the earth and destroying it. Is this just a manga, or is this saying something about the world that we are living in? How many of you watching this video can confidently say that you have hope? Maybe not even just hope, but more specifically, hope for the future. How many of you watching this video suffer from anxiety, have anger issues, or maybe even hate someone or something? And I'm pretty sure most of you can relate in one of those aspects. If not most, all of you do, because nobody is perfect. Now think about how you feel like shit. Now without tweaking, try to imagine just how many people are there out on this earth that might feel just like you, or if not worse. That's a shit ton of people. Now that you picture this shit ton of people that have these issues, let's try to think about people who actually try to deal with them and don't make excuses and actually try to better themselves. There's not many. People have depression and may not even know that they have depression. Your parents might even have depression and they're just not dealing with it, and they try to body through their life while doing this. Now let's think of just how many humans there are out there. Your parents, you, your friends, any other people on earth that you can think of that feels like shit, or might even feel even worse than you do. That's a lot to try and comprehend. If all of us feel this way and we try to push all of our emotions to the side and try to ignore it, what is going to happen? Where would all that energy manifest if we leave it undealt with? One person might feel anxious, they might feel angry, and in the heat of the moment, they might punch somebody in the face. Now imagine if 100 people were in that same heat of the moment, had that same anxiety, or might even have it even worse than you do. And all of that happens, the heat of the moment all happens at one time, the world would be fucked. And I know what I'm about to propose might seem crazy, it might seem impossible, but man to man, humankind to humankind, human to human. Without being an edgy motherfucker that's on the internet, I have a legitimate question. How can we deal with this?
What you said, easier said than done.
Well, no shit, Sherlock, but how can we make it so that y'all at least have faith in humanity or faith in yourself? So in the future, energy like this will not manifest. How can we all stop being a bunch of kronas and start living some happy lives? People, I don't know how to deal with them. All of these shitty feelings that we all feel. How can we deal with them and not be like a krona? Me, I like to have fun, live a good life, hang out with my friends, just like the characters in Soul Eater. I don't, all that krona shit, I don't want to deal with that krona shit. Because living life like that is down bad, and we already know where that character arc ends. And it ends with self-destruction. And this can happen on a massive scale. And that is basically what's happening in Fire Force. Because of our mindsets, we find a way to justify these inconsistencies. And once we give these inconsistencies power, shit like this happens. Oh, the evangelist, you finally showed yourself. The evangelist is the entire collective unconscious giving form. That thing, the collective unconscious, is a shared consciousness in all of humanity's unconscious. It's the materialization of the secret desire of humans, aka self-destruction. The final point of imagination, at the end of its evolution, humanity desires its own extermination. God didn't create humanity, humanity created God from their despair. And then God gave birth to more despair. But this brings into question, what is God? God could be religions, friends, information, science, art, culture, and family. It can be anything as long as it provides salvation. And in Fire Force, this sun god was providing that salvation. Whenever your family member would turn into a first generation, you would pray to the sun god that they would return to the great flame. And that would be your form of salvation. Anything could be salvation for you, your friends, your family, just as we mentioned earlier. But humanity's history on the other side of salvation, war, slaughter, accidents, disaster, sickness, and many new despairs were born. And as time passed, we developed ethics, values, medicine, technology, and laws. And the safer we got, the more salvation we had. But through this, death became more frightful. The fear in their hearts got stronger, and despair became stronger still. And then soon after that, despite these changes, the great cataclysm still happened. We live these safe yet privileged lives, but we are still the same. In order to stop this cycle, is there any other way outside of death? Is there any other salvation outside of it? And Shinra continues to argue that there's no way death is the only salvation. It's impossible that everyone wishes for death. Then Hao-Mei responds, on the surface that's correct, but what about deep within people's minds? Even people who held life in high regard and hope for salvation still chose death. These two girls are the very life force of mankind, and yet they learned of this cycle and accepted it, because nothing lasts forever in this world. And then we are met with the death of Iris. She accepted the salvation of death that Hao-Mei had offered her, and Shinra slowly begins to lose himself even more, as he begins to charge at Hao-Mei, proving her point right, as he tries to deliver her the same death to put an end to this cycle. Then surely you understand salvation can be brought on through death. And Sho proclaims to Shinra that he's just playing into God's hands. And then Hao-Mei continues to try and trick Shinra into believing this inconsistency. But little did Shinra know is that his entire life he was believing this inconsistency, because whenever he would defeat a first generation, he believed that he was bringing them salvation. And through that, he was killing them in order to make them return to the Great Flame. And like I said about us working towards a brighter future, we must not let ourselves get swallowed up by our emotions, because they will only lead to despair. And this is exactly what happened to Krona, and it's exactly what is going to happen to Shinra. You must not allow yourself to be swallowed up by anger. Anger is the best trigger to bring out death and despair. Sho acts as Shinra's guardian angel as he tries to help him recollect himself. The relief after achieving revenge may suppress your anger, but the feeling will never truly disappear. My brother fights not only for revenge, but for the sake of human lives. This fight isn't for revenge, it's to protect all of humanity, for the sake of our remaining comrades. And then Sho and Shinra begin to retaliate against Hao-Mei. But for some reason, their attacks will never reach her. And the reason for that is, after killing Inka and Sumire, Hao-Mei now has both of their powers. But despite Sho and Shinra's futile efforts, they are no match for Hao-Mei. And it turns out, even if they were to defeat Hao-Mei, if Shinra was just so happened to die, the world would fall into despair. Because it is through Shinra's despair or death that will trigger the destruction of the world. The only one who controls the end of the Great Cataclysm is you, brother. You're the savior, and the saint has no say in that. Just like what I said earlier in the video about self-destruction, We are just like Shinra. We are our own saviors. The only one who controls the end of the great cataclysm is you, the reader, because we are no different than Shinra. I'm not gonna die and I'm not gonna get swallowed up by rage, but I will stop Haume. Just like Shinra, whether or not we get swallowed up by our emotions and act through those same emotions, we will bring about our true feelings in self-destruction. When you are angry, you want to punch someone or something, and that is the undeniable truth. And it is through an action like this you crave your own self-destruction. Shinra is fighting for the sake of his comrades, but wasn't able to protect one of the people most important to him. Haume forcing Shinra to agree with her ideology has cornered him. The flames of your rage can only be extinguished by the death of your opponent, showing him that salvation can be brought through death. Through the act of Shinra giving in to despair and acting on this negative energy, it will turn him and us into devils. It is also true that you became a hero thanks to those very flames of vengeance. Perhaps all the time you mask your actions and claims behind a so-called sense of justice because that sounded nice. And it is through this righteousness that Shinra begins to get even more frustrated. Haume's righteousness began to frustrate him to his core. I am a fire soldier, not a devil. I fight for the sake of saving people's lives. But those words were as weak as a small fish struggling to go up a waterfall. Their weight couldn't be compared to the words of a god who spoke the consensus of humanity's subconscious. Humans have persisted on living purely by facades and lip service, and that pretense is often opposite of their true feelings. Humans were originally savages, true to their instincts. Civilization's advance suppresses that. So what are his true feelings? The answer is exceedingly simple and awfully instinctual. He wanted to kill her. His salvation only exists in her death. Although even he understands that this isn't true salvation, he still felt he needed to kill her. And Shinra continues to play into the hands of the evangelist. It's okay, show. Don't worry, I'm not angry at all. To Haume then responds, "You're a terrible liar, Shinra." Shinra responds, "I will fight to protect everyone." And then Haume answers, "How are you going to protect yourself?" And then Shinra ends up dying. Now I think this is a proper cliffhanger until the next chapter review. I'll see you guys in the next video, and hopefully this answered some of your questions. Will Shinra fall to despair? Find out in the next chapter. Oh, it's already out, so you know what? We'll just have to see what I think about it.